Hello, my name is Marilyn Halprin, and I want to welcome you to the Chicago Shakestream version of our ongoing and ever-popular preamble series. Over the years, these half-hour talks illuminating the work on our stages have been hosted here at the theater with guest scholars just prior to our weekend matinee performances. Now, we have the opportunity to make them available for everyone at any time and at home. We hope you enjoy today's talk.
Hello, welcome to the preamble lecture for Chicago Shakespeare Theater's production of As You Like It, directed by Darrell Cloran. I'm Regina Bucola, Chair of Humanities at Roosevelt University here in Chicago and Scholar in Residence at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. What I'd like to do to orient you to the play and the production is talk a little bit about the play in its own time before situating it in its production's time, and then to talk some about the many parallel plots and character situations that we encounter over the course of the play, in addition to talking about how well the music of the Beatles fits into this play, which is already one of Shakespeare's most musical. As with most of Shakespeare's plays, dating As You Like It is a tricky and uncertain business. Most people place it as a mature comedy, dating from the mid to late 1590s. As You Like It is a warm, joyous play that is centered on its women characters. The play marks a sort of pause button between the history plays, particularly the histories featuring the usurper Henry Bolingbroke and his son and heir Henry V, and then the late great tragedies such as King Lear. Women characters are ancillary to the war-focused world of the Henry plays, and they're at the heart of the darkness in King Lear. They occupy a very different space in As You Like It, where they are central figures and really the fulcrum on which the plot in the play turns, and also the ones whose actions drive a lot of the plot, including who ends up with whom romantically, all the way down to who is in power at the end of the play. The women at the center of this play are Rosalind, daughter to the banished Duke Senior, and her cousin and very, very dear friend Celia, daughter to the usurper Duke, Duke Frederick. At the outset of the play, Rosalind and Celia attend a wrestling match where Rosalind falls head over heels in love with Orlando Du Bois, who is victorious in the match. Unfortunately, though, he manages to raise the ire of Duke Frederick with his victory in this wrestling match, because it turns out Duke Frederick hated his father too, Sir Rowland Du Bois. In a parallel plot about the sibling rivalry that we see between Duke Frederick and Duke Senior, Orlando is embroiled in a conflict with his own older brother, Oliver. His faithful servant, Adam, reveals to him that his brother has a nefarious plot that puts his life in danger, and so he urges him to flee for safety to the forest of Arden, where Duke Senior has already taken up residence too. In another parallel movement, Rosalind manages to anger Duke Frederick too, and so she is also banished by her uncle. Her loyal cousin Celia and the court jester Touchstone join her in her own flight to Arden, just as Orlando is joined in his escape by the faithful Adam. For the journey to Arden, Celia and Rosalind both adopt disguises. Celia becomes Aliena to capture her experience of being alienated from both her father and his court. More sensationally, Rosalind becomes Ganymede, cross-dressing as a male youth and adopting the name of one of the favorite boy toys of Jove. Once she encounters Orlando in the forest, she begins an elaborate courtship ritual with him, in which she, as Ganymede, in her male guise, impersonates Rosalind, her true female guise. Watch for a physical tic that Lakeisha Renee, who portrays Rosalind and Ganymede in this production, adopts to sort of give herself a bit of male swagger that backfires on her sensationally every single time that she does it. The cast of characters in The Forest is rounded out with Duke Sr.'s Robin Hood-like band of followers, including the melancholy Jakes and the tuneful Amiens. Reflecting Orlando's courtship of Rosalind in male disguise is the doomed adoration of Ganymede by the shepherdess Phoebe, who takes her male disguise for the genuine gender article and pines away for her, even as she rejects the attentions of a much more fitting suitor for her, Silvius. Silvius suffers all manner of abuse, some of it physical in this production, from the scornful Phoebe. After repeatedly teasing Rosalind for falling so hard, so fast for Orlando, Celia becomes a bit of a hypocrite when she makes her own swan dive into love late in the play with the penitent Oliver, Orlando's brother. One final couple that is played for bawdy laughs toward the end of the play brings us to a total of 4 marital matches in the final scene of the play. Shakespeare took this plot almost whole cloth from Thomas Lodge's prose narrative, Rosalind. Much like a Broadway musical today, think of something like Wicked, for example, that's based on a book, Shakespeare's As You Like It constitutes a streamlining and adapting of Lodge's prose and also a musicalizing of it, both on the level of the verse itself and on the level of the songs that appear in the original play. Unlike Shakespeare's habit in most of his other plays that feature songs, where a title might be referenced or a snippet of a song referenced in the text and may be sung, As You Like It features 5 full songs that are meant to be performed in their entirety if we follow what the script says. As Gary Griffith put it when he directed the last production of As You Like It for Chicago Shakespeare Theater in 2011, As You Like It really could be considered Shakespeare's musical. Enter director Darrell Cloran, who reached the same conclusion in 2018 when he adapted and directed As You Like It for Bard on the Beach. Given that the Beatles are known for a song catalog that's mostly focused on love, 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 Cloran could see how the text, full of not only musical verse and songs, but also 400-year-old inside jokes that might not make sense to us anymore, could also be streamlined, just like Shakespeare did originally with the prose text of Rosalind by Thomas Lodge. And using the music of the Beatles in place of some of the Shakespearean era songs, which were popular in their own day too, could revisit some of the embedded poetry in the play and make it live for us in a new and different way. From that move, it was a short hop to a costume and set design evocative of the groovy 1960s. Word to the wise, you will want to get to the theater and into your seat early, as the pre-show for this production introduces you to some of the play's central characters, including Charles the Wrestler, Touchstone, the Duke's jester, and Duke Frederick himself, who will be stalking back and forth on the catwalk that spans the upstage space, watching what's going on in the wrestling ring center stage below, a wrestling entertainment that is set up for his express entertainment, but that plenty of other people show up to enjoy. Just below the Duke, in the lower upstage space, which you can see behind me, is the house band for the play. Each of the play's 4, of course, members is a multi-talented person who not only provides skilled musical accompaniment throughout the performance and vocals for the show, but also takes the part, or even in some cases parts, of various characters in the play. Carmen Alatorre's costumes and wigs situate the characters within the pop culture context of the Beatles songs that the play includes. As Touchstone, for example, Keivan Koshkam visually evokes Elton John, from his wavy wig and outrageous pairs of glasses which rotate scene to scene, all the way down to his fabulous white platform shoes with sparkly red lightning bolts on their big chunky heels. Once the action of the play shifts from Duke Frederick's court to the Forest of Arden, where the banished Duke Senior holds court, Touchstone meets up with his alter ego, the melancholy Jakes, portrayed here by Deborah Hay as a waifish sort of Andy Warhol, complete with black turtleneck and a riotous white blonde wig. Rosalind and Celia's court attire and fabulous hairdos, meanwhile, are evocative of all-women African-American groups from the 60s, like the Supremes or the Shirelles. Set designer Pam Johnson surrounds the upstage space, as you can see sort of behind me, with vibrant multicolored light boxes that reminded me as I watched the show of Hollywood Squares. And so I did some research and found out that it indeed debuted during the mid-1960s on TV in lockstep with the Fab Four's rise to superstardom. Johnson renders the Forest of Arden a hippie paradise, led by a sandal-sporting Kevin Goodall, who doubles the parts of Duke Frederick and Duke Senior, the brother whom he has usurped. Tree stumps, a grassy knoll, and a yellow Volkswagen bus rolls into position upstage to complete the forest scene. The court is a place of contention, from Duke Frederick's preferred form of entertainment, wrestling, to the way in which he took power in the first place through usurpation. All is peace, love, and rock and roll once we get to the forest, even though some of the love in question gets a little bit messy until it's sorted in the final scene. For director Darrell Cloran, wrestling is more than just the Duke's preoccupation and preferred pastime. Rather, it becomes a sort of governing metaphor for the action of the play as a whole. Duke Frederick has, metaphorically, wrestled his brother Duke Senior for control of the duchy by the act of usurping him. That conflict takes place before the action of the play begins, but we hear about it, and we see it paralleled in physical combat between Orlando and his brother Oliver, who wrongfully deprives him of the educational support to which he should be entitled according to the stipulations of their dead father's will. Once Rosalind and Orlando fall in love at first sight, we watch as they humorously wrestle with the strength of their own emotions for one another. Rosalind is more successful initially at mastering them while they are at court, only to become overwhelmed by them herself in the Forest of Arden. The emotional responses of the characters and their struggle to control them are reflective of another fight in which they are engaged, and that is the wrestling with identity that everyone must do from time to time. Certainly as a young person when you are encountering one of your first significant romantic relationships. The young lovers wrestle with their own self-conceptions and identities in the face of conflicts with their elders, and in the face of the kinds of compromises that a romantic relationship requires you to make in yourself in order for it to be successful. As the kids say today, the struggle is real. The struggle to accept a love relationship into one's life with all of the attendant compromises and modifications to the self that that acceptance requires is really the lone conflict in the play. A chorus of scholars over the years have noted the fact that there really is not much of a plot in As You Like It. There is virtually no motivation provided for any of the action. Since Rosalind and Celia both fall in love at first sight with their respective Du Bois boys, and there is no real obstacle to that attraction, particularly for Rosalind and Orlando, we never really understand why they don't just embrace that from the beginning. We never doubt the happy outcome. We are never told why Duke Frederick usurped his older brother, Duke Senior, or why anyone at court tolerates this usurpation, since everyone, from his own daughter to the wrestler Charles, seems to think that it was a really bad idea. Oliver does not explain why he treats his brother Orlando so badly. Indeed, in a soliloquy, he tells us in the audience that there is no good reason for his envy of him. The motivation that Rosalind provides for disguising herself as the boy Ganymede before they flee into the forest is that this will be a better protection for two virtually unchaperoned young women going out into the forest. Why then does she retain the disguise once they are safely in Arden and she actually runs into her father, who would certainly protect her, as well as her beloved Orlando, who presumably would as well? We don't know. And I would submit that if you really give yourself over to the story and the fun of the musical accompaniment in this particular production, you really won't care. In this hyperhymeneal play that culminates in 4 marriages, parallel plots and events abound to complement the proliferating couples. The central parallel plots in the play are these, and I've already gone over some of them, so I want to focus on some of the character parallels as well. So we have 2 sets of brothers in conflict, the Dukes and Oliver and Orlando. We have 2 banishments. Duke Seniors happen before the action of the play begins, but Orlando, as well as Rosalind and Celia, also flee the court once the action of the play starts. After falling in love at first sight, both Orlando and Rosalind raise the suspicious ire of the new Duke. Rosalind is banished, while first the courtier LeBeau and then Adam advise Orlando to get out of town before he is also banished, or worse. Rosalind as Ganymede becomes a love tutor to both Orlando and Silvius in the Forest of Arden, working to steer both of these men from their unrealistic notions of love based in the conventions of pastoral verse and the Petrarchan sonnet traditions to more grounded, practical views of love relationships that are based more firmly in mutuality and frank communication. Rosalind as Ganymede performs 2 parallel critiques of love poetry and of its posturing. First, of Orlando's extravagant verses in praise of her feminine beauties, and then of Phoebe's verses, written in an admiring anatomization of what she takes to be Rosalind's masculine selling points in her Ganymede disguise. Rosalind as Ganymede becomes the homoerotic love object of both Orlando and the hilarious Heidi Kettenring's Phoebe. To Orlando, she is a boy playing the woman, Rosalind, when, of course, as we know, all of these roles on Shakespeare's stage would originally have been taken by boy actors. To Phoebe, she is the boy, Ganymede, whom modern audiences know is really the woman actor who's playing Rosalind. Like Orlando and Rosalind, Aliena or Celia, her alter ego, also fall in love at first sight. Orlando twice wins love in the play through physical hardship. First, he wins Rosalind's love by wrestling Charles, the Duke's court wrestler whom no one else can defeat, and he restores his relationship with his brother Oliver by somewhat sensationally fighting a lioness in the Forest of Arden. He saves his brother's life through this action and thus reverses the pattern of the animosity that we see between them in the very first scene of the play. Their fight in that opening scene clearly becomes physical, as the lines indicate, and which this production stages as a very important prelude to the wrestling match that Orlando ultimately has with Charles. Prior to the quartet of marriages in the play's final scene, there are also 2 parallel abortive marriages in the Forest of Arden. The first of these is Rosalind as Ganymede's to Orlando, which is reluctantly presided over by Celia as Aliena. And then there's also Touchstone's planned rustic nuptial to Audrey, presided over by the very suggestively named Sir Oliver Martext, and interrupted by the would-be witness to the affair, Jakes. The 4 love matches in this play constitute a Fab Four all their own. As John Ward Powell notes, by the end of the play, the 4 lovers have formed a sort of quadratic equation that it is up to Rosalind to solve. Phoebe, like Falstaff, is not only witty in herself, but the cause that wit is in many of the other characters in the play. However, Phoebe also plays a significant role in the play's love tangle, insofar as she is not only in tension between Silvius, whom she rejects but is desperately wanted by, and Ganymede, whom she wants and is rejected by, she also matches and contrasts Orlando in their shared ignorance. Orlando can have Rosalind as Ganymede, but he doesn't initially realize it. Phoebe can't, and also doesn't initially realize it, or the reason why. Ward goes on to point out, as I have as well, that the play is loaded with pairs. In addition to the two dukes and the two brothers, he notes that both of their names begin with O. 2 female cousins, 4 love matches, 2 intellectuals or clowns, and these pairs then generate further pairings. Rosalind and Celia and Orlando and Oliver become Rosalind and Orlando and Celia and Oliver. Phoebe and Orlando pair in wanting Ganymede or Rosalind. Jakes and Touchstone pair, but so do Touchstone and Audrey. In Cloran's production, the doubling extends to that wrestling pre-show that I told you to get there early to see, where Charles takes on all comers, including a rule-breaking set of twins. However, not all of the couples in the play are created equally. Rosalind's part has the most lines of any female role in Shakespeare. However, Robert Smallwood points out that she is paired with an equally potent feminine force in the person of her cousin, Celia. He ticks off the crucial aspects of Celia's role. It is Celia who is the heir of the dukedom at the beginning of the play, insofar as her father is the usurper duke. It is Celia who controlled Rosalind's mood in the first scene in which we see the two of them together. It is Celia who protests her father's treatment of and banishment of Rosalind in the beginning of the play. She's also the one who thinks of the idea that they should escape to Arden, and importantly comes up with how they will finance this journey. Celia is the one, once they arrive in Arden, who keeps in mind important life necessities like food and shelter, and she's the one who suggests the idea that they increase the shepherd Corin's wages, thus establishing their household there. It seems then until quite late in the play that what we have is a partnership of equals, with a strong Celia a very important ingredient in any successful production of As You Like It. In Cloran's production, Celia is also the first one of the pair to invoke the Beatles in song. She uses them in a musical context to confront the issues that her cousin Rosalind is facing at court, as the daughter of the banished duke, and also as kind of miserable and lonely. So she uses music to lighten the mood, telling her, "Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend." In addition to the fact that, as I've mentioned, As You Like It has numerous songs in it already, it is also one of Shakespeare's more lyrical plays, so heavy on verse that Jakes at one point is prompted to leave a scene complaining, "Nay then, and God be with you talk in blank verse." Moving from their early simple pop lyrics, such as "She Loves You," to more complex later works like Let It Be or Across the Universe, Darrell Cloran ultimately replaces about half of the blank verse of Shakespeare, who dominates the literary and theatrical spheres, with the music and lyrics of the Beatles, who are the reigning stars of pop. One of the most effective such substitutions comes when Beatles lyrics replace Orlando's terrifically terrible poetry inspired by his love of Rosalind. Orlando decorates, or as Jakes would have it, litters the forest of Arden with his poetry about Rosalind, and Celia and Touchstone make merciless fun of her for being the muse behind such awful verse. For the sake of comparison, let's watch a bit of Shakespeare's original version of this scene as presented in Gary Griffin's production of As You Like It at Chicago Shakespeare Theatre in 2011.
From the east to western end, no jewel is like Rosalind. Worth being mounted on the wind through all the world bears Rosalind. All the pictures fairest lined are but black to Rosalind. Let no face be kept in mind. but the fair of Rosalind.
All right, so 8 years together, dinners and suppers and sleeping hours except.
Out, fool!
For a taste. If a heart do lack a hind, let him seek out Rosaline. If the cattle after kine, so be sure we'll Rosaline. Wintry garments must be lined, so must slender Rosaline. They that reap must sheep and bind, then to court with Rosaline. Sweetest nut hath sourest rind, such a nut is Rosaline. He that sweet as rose must find love's prick and Rosaline. This is the very false gallop of verses. Why do you infect yourself with them?
Peace, you dull fool! I found them on a tree.
Truly, the tree yields bad fruit.
Now, let's contrast with the way that this scene is handled in Daryl Cloran's version, with a significant assist from the Beatles.
Oh, look! Here comes young Master Ganymede.
We have to hide.
Why?
'Cause it's Shakespeare, come on.
I need your love, babe. Guess you know it's true. Hope you need my love, babe. Just like I need you. Hold me. Love me. Hold me. Love
This is a very false gallop of verses. Why do you infect yourself with them?
Peace, you dull fool. I found the verses on a tree.
Oh, truly, the tree yields bad fruit.
As you can see in watching this scene, masters of pop though they may be, if you just read the Beatles' lyrics straightforwardly without any musical accompaniment, they can sound a lot like the same kind of dreck that Orlando was decorating the Forest of Arden with. Richard Poyrer identified an attribute of the Beatles that one could also ascribe to Shakespeare. Writing in the Partisan Review in 1967, he identified the Beatles as operating from a self-motivated creative restlessness, pushing beyond the bounds of forms and formulas that had been wildly commercially successful for them in the past, for no other reason than that they had a desire to try something new. They are the ones who get tired of the sounds they have made, and the testings and teasings that produce each new album are self-inflicted. One could say much the same of Shakespeare, who ranged across genres over the course of his writing career, never content to rest on his laurels or indeed his commercial success in any one arena, whether it be in his sonnets, or comic, or history plays, or even the tragic ones. One of the ways in which Shakespeare focuses our attention on Rosalind and Orlando and their love relationship in this play also relates to his skill as a writer. He makes them seem well suited to one another, kind of a la Beatrice and Benedick, by focusing on their verbal sparring, which is, of course, an example of Shakespeare's own verbal pyrotechnics. Orlando debates the virtues of both Rosalind and love itself with Ganymede, really Rosalind, and she winningly woos him to a more grounded approach to relationships. Another way that Shakespeare shifts Rosalind and Orlando to the foreground when you have this crowded field of 4 love relationships in the play is by making the other couples either ridiculous, like Touchstone and his disheveled country wench Audrey, or the pining Silvius and the scornful Phoebe, or just showing us less of their courtship period, as he does with Celia and Oliver. One possible reason that Phoebe is attracted to Ganymede, other than just sheer physical beauty, could be their shared skepticism about Petrarchan romantic traditions, conventions that Shakespeare also employed in his own sonnets as well as in the plays themselves. Petrarch's Italian sonnets had been translated into English a full generation before Shakespeare was writing, during the reign of King Henry VIII, under the work of Wyatt and Surrey. Shakespeare knew their work and was kind of a copycat artist himself, using these tropes over and over again for his own poetic successes. As Ganymede, Rosalind rejects out of hand Orlando's assertion that he would love Rosalind forever and a day. Say the day without the ever, she tells him. When he swears that Rosalind's frown could kill him, she swears in return, it will not kill a fly. Phoebe rejects the same Petrarchan conceit of the unattainable mistress's killing looks when she tells Silvius, I fly thee, for I would not injure me. Thou tellest me there is murder in mine eye, but now mine eyes, which have darted at thee, hurt thee not. Petrarchan's sonnets, with conceits like these in them, were the Beatles' hits of their day. Even Shakespeare was, as I say, a copycat artist in this regard, catching a ride on the going trend when he worked this kind of material into his own plays. Shakespeare wisely wrote in the opening line of Twelfth Night, "If music be the food of love, play on." For this production of As You Like It, we might well modify that line to say, "If music be the food of love, rock on."